Good morning. Is anyone ready for Christmas yet? Feels early, doesn't it? But actually today is the start of our Christmas series. So whether you like it or not, Christmas is coming to us. It is upon us. But if we haven't met yet, my name is Craig and I'm part of the team here. I have the privilege of serving here. And one of the things you may or may not know about me is over the years, I've done a whole load of various different jobs, mainly for like a maximum of about a week or maybe like a couple of days. Or I've done lots of, Charlotte, my wife, always laughs at me because I say I've done lots of jobs, whereas in reality, I may have done them for 1 or 2 days. But one of the things I did, so in my, when I was in my second year at Bible college, heading into Christmas, I realized that I was massively running out of money. Okay, I hadn't budgeted properly, and so heading into the Christmas period, I was a little bit stuck. I'd burnt through a few savings, and I needed a job over the Christmas period, right? And so I was praying for a job over the Christmas period, and then one day in the canteen, there was this random guy sat there who was one of the parents of one of the other students, and I got chatting to him, and it turned out he had a business that planted trees. All right, really random. He had a lot of businesses, actually. He was a bit of a Del Boy character, which might give you an insight into how this story goes. But he had a load of businesses, and he told me, he said, planting trees is where the money's at, okay? Forget working in London, forget, kind of dealing in gold. He said, if you plant trees, you can make an absolute killing. It was like, right, you get paid 50p per tree, all right? But he was like, you can plant several hundred a day. That was his sales pitch. You can plant several hundred a day. So he was like, all right, I reckon if you work for me for a week, you can make about £1,000. All right. Now, as a student, £1,000 for a week. I mean, that is incredible news, wasn't it? So up I went, sign me up. I'm there for it. And I signed up a couple of mates, joined as well, because you needed a bit of a crew to do it. And we set off from the Midlands each morning down to Brighton. So we were leaving at like 4 in.the morning to go and plant trees in December in Britain on a hill in the middle of nowhere. You can imagine how much fun that was, right? It was windy. Two out of the 4 days we were doing it, it just rained the whole day. It was that cold where we learned early doors that if you stopped to eat, you couldn't start again. So we just didn't eat. We just kind of went going. But unfortunately for us as well, planting trees is a little bit harder than he maybe entailed. And actually, maybe planting several hundred trees each day wasn't going to happen. You see, for each tree, we had to carry this big pile of stakes up the hill, and it was quite a steep hill, again, in the middle of nowhere. And unfortunately, as well, the little tractor we had to bring the stakes couldn't get closer than about sort of 500 meters away. So we had to carry these stakes 500 meters up this hill, plant the tree, put the stake in, put the plastic around it. And as you can see on the screen, we've got a picture of some of the trees we planted. And unfortunately as well, maybe you could plant several hundred trees a day if you had a crack team of tree planters. Unfortunately, from the picture, you can see we weren't exactly a crack team of tree planters. And so our expectation was that we all thought that we would each make about £1,000 for the week. Unfortunately, we probably all made about £200 over the week. So it wasn't quite it was an experience, I'll put it down to, but it wasn't maybe quite as exciting. And actually, unfortunately as well, the guy we worked for maybe wasn't the wasn't the best employer. And so getting payment for that week took a little while as well, as you can imagine. So our expectations were really high for this week of tree planting, but they weren't quite met. It wasn't really as it should have been. But I think that's quite a common experience we share, isn't it? When we go through life, there's lots of things that aren't as they should be. Maybe we have expectations that aren't quite met. We have dreams that don't quite happen. Maybe we look at the world around us, even on a much bigger scale than just a few trees and not getting paid as much as I wanted. We look around us and we see homelessness, we see disease, we see wars around this world, and we think life isn't as it should be. This world isn't as it should be. I think it's a common thing we all share as human beings. There's part of us inside that goes, there should be more than this. It shouldn't be like this. And you're thinking right now, this is a really hopeful Christmas message. But isn't it? We have that experience, don't we? Life isn't as it should be. But you see, this series we're starting today is called Heaven on Earth. Heaven on Earth. And see, when Jesus came to earth, You see, he came to a world that wasn't as it should be to bring hope. See, in the midst of darkest situations, in the midst of a crisis of identity, of hope, Jesus came into this world that wasn't as it should be, but he came to bring hope. He came to bring heaven on earth. And the message of Christmas today, the message of Jesus, is that he comes into our lives that aren't as they should be, that often are lacking hope, that we have unmet expectations, but yet Jesus comes and he brings hope. He brings heaven on earth. And so I wonder if you've got your Bibles, you can turn them on, you can open them to Isaiah chapter 9, verses 1 to 7. Now, Isaiah is a prophet. It's a book containing lots of prophecy. So this is given to the Israelites, the nation of Judah, prophesying about something that's going to happen in the future. It's telling them about Jesus who's going to come, although they may not have quite realized that in the moment. So Isaiah chapter 9, verses 1 to 7. Nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who were in distress. In the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, but in the future, he will honor Galilee of the nations by the way of the sea beyond the Jordan. The people walking in darkness have seen great light. On those in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. You have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people rejoiced at the harvest, as warriors rejoice when dividing the plunder. For as in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke that burdens them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor. Every warrior's boot used in battle and every garment rolled in blood will be destined for burning, will be fuel for the fire. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the greatness of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. Amen. So the context of this passage here, the nation of Judah, at this point, the Israelites have had a bit of a tumultuous time. As Carl said, they had some really great moments, but this is a bit of a low moment for them. In fact, the nation had separated into two different kingdoms. So you had the northern kingdom of Israel, you can see it on the map, the northern kingdom of Israel. They had completely gone astray. They weren't they weren't following God or following God in the ways they were meant to, and they had gone astray. And then down below you have the kingdom of Judah, and they were trying to be faithful to God, but they weren't really doing a very good job of it. And if you look to the north of the map, you'll see the Assyrian Empire. Now, at the time, the Assyrian Empire was the big empire of the day, and they are trying to invade Judah. So they've already kind of got Israel, the northern kingdom, under their control, and they're trying to invade Judah. And now Judah are trying to pay them off, but it's not working. So they find themselves in a really hopeless situation. They find themselves about to be invaded. They realize that their army isn't remotely strong enough, isn't powerful enough to fight them off. They're in a hopeless situation. And so this prophecy is given to them in the midst of a hopeless situation, but offering hope. But you see that the solution they wanted was just the immediate freedom from this invasion that was about to happen. But actually what this prophecy offers is something even deeper than that, something even bigger than that. And I want to unpack a little bit about what heaven on earth means, because I think this prophecy brings us in onto the story of heaven on earth, of Jesus coming to bring heaven on earth. Again, in verse 1, it talked about Zebulun and Naphtali, and so it talks about the land there and bringing deliverance there. Well, as you can, if you won't see on the map, but right at the north of the northern kingdom, that's where they were located. So they were the first place that the Assyrians invaded. So actually in this prophecy, it's saying, I'm going to get to the absolute root of the problem. You see, the root of their problem was this northern territory, that once that got broken, their defense line was through, and they were stuffed. They were in trouble. And so here it says they're going to deal with the root of the problem. But you see, the true root of the problem wasn't that those two northern tribes had been invaded. The root of the problem was that they had erred from God. The root of the problem was that they had allowed their own ways of doing things, their own desires, to get in the way of their worship of God. You see, when they moved into the land, God said, if you put me first, if you serve me, you love me, you honor me, I will be your God, I will provide, I will keep you safe, I will be your shield and your strength. That was the promise to them, but yet they had erred from that. See, their problem wasn't a problem of a weakness of defense, it was a weakness of worship. It was a weakness of life, and it was allowing sin to control. But you see, today, when we look at this world that isn't as it should be, the root of the problem isn't political parties that fail. They may have, symptoms, but that's not the root of the problem. The root of the problem isn't the systems around us, isn't the weather. The root of the problem is the problem of the human heart. The root of the problem is the things that we allow to get in the way of our worship and our relationship with God. It's choosing to live life our ways. You see, even though this is a prophecy given to a nation several thousand years ago, the root of the problem is the same. It's humanity choosing to live life distant from God. And so just like in this prophecy where they promised to send a son who will deal with the root of the problem, Jesus came to deal with the root of the human problem. He came to bring heaven on earth. You see, the reason why life isn't as it should be was the original plan was that God and man would live together. God and man, heaven and earth, would be together, one place. It would be good, it would be perfect, it would be special. But yet the problem of human sin, of us choosing to do things our own way, meant a divide between heaven and earth. And so we find ourselves on this earth that isn't as it should be. It's the reason why things aren't as should be. It's the reason why we see suffering, we see greed, we see jealousy. It's the issue of the human heart separating ourselves from God. And so God sends a solution in Jesus. And that's the hope this Christmas, that God sent a solution in Jesus. And so what I want to unpack a little bit today is a few things in this passage that it talks about what God's kingdom's like. Because Jesus says, I come to bring heaven on earth, I come to bring the kingdom of heaven. And so in this passage, it describes a few things that are markers of the kingdom of heaven. If I was to you, what are a few things that are markers of what the kingdom of Great Britain's like? You might say, it's cold. Anyone else got anything? You might say, they eat bad food if you go and ask people other places in the world. You might say, got a dry sense of humor. That there are markers for every kingdom. You can think about different countries and they have a marker. And here I think we see some markers of what the kingdom of heaven's like, what the kingdom that Jesus came to bring is like. And so they're going to be on the screen, so if you make notes, I encourage you to write them down. But firstly, one of the markers of the kingdom of heaven is peace. It's peace. Don't we need a bit of that in our world today? Where we see wars, where we see family breakdown, we need peace. We need God's peace. You see, Jesus came to bring peace. Whereas they were hoping that he would come and overthrow when he came, the Roman Empire, he came and brought peace. He came and gave his life to bring peace. And so the marker of the kingdom of heaven is peace. You even read in this passage where it says that the warrior's boots will be burned. They won't need the methods of war anymore, won't be needed, because there will be peace when Jesus comes. Freedom. There will be freedom. The mark of the kingdom is freedom. Whereas the systems of this world, so many things, inequality, seek to bring slavery and to hold people back, the marker of the kingdom is freedom. Joy. In this passage, we see in verse 3 that he wants to bring joy, that they will celebrate when the sun comes. Because actually a marker of the kingdom is joy. Even when systems of life, when things don't look right, we can have a deep joy because of the kingdom. A counselor. He's going to be a wonderful counselor. See, a marker of the kingdom is that we're not alone. We're put into families, but also we have a God who can help us. And justice. God's kingdom is a kingdom of justice, where things that aren't right aren't left, where things that aren't right are challenged, are broken, because actually God made every single one of us to be equal, to be free, and to prosper in his name. His kingdom chooses to bring justice. So that's what his kingdom's like. And so if he comes to bring heaven on earth, he wants to bring these things on earth. So when it comes to our lives, he wants to bring heaven on earth in our lives too. He wants his kingdom to be established in our lives. So what does that mean for us? You can have peace in the inner turmoil that you feel inside, in the questions, in the in the strains of life, you can have peace. Peace is an offer through Jesus. You can have freedom where the slaves of sin, the things that hold you back, the things that make life a struggle for you, the gospel of Jesus says you can have freedom. Joy. You can have joy in Jesus, in the hope of what he can do for you, in the hope of his salvation. A counselor. You can have a counselor. The promise of Jesus coming is that he came to be near to us, not to be far. We don't worship a God who is distant and removed. You know, many other religions worship a God who is far away, and you do what you can to try and please him. The God we worship, the God we serve, is a God who came to us, to be near to us, to help us, and by his Holy Spirit, he does that today. That's the God that we serve. And justice. We serve a God who hates things that aren't right. We see so much injustice around us, things that frustrate us, things that anger us. God is angered by those things too, and he wants those things to be right. See, these things are the hallmark of God's kingdom, what Jesus came to bring on earth. This is what his kingdom is like, what he wants our lives to be like. This is what life under King Jesus looks like. But the question we have to ask is this. See, in verse 7 it says, "Of the greatness of his government and peace, there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on forever." But we have a choice to make, is that do we allow this king to have governance over our lives? So we have a choice whether we choose to allow this king to be the king who rules in our lives, or whether we choose to continue doing life our own way. The choice is there for you. I'd encourage you, maybe you might even be here as a guest for the dedications, or you've come along today. The choice is yours today. You can choose to live life your own way, to continue doing those things, and we get by in a world that isn't as it should be, isn't what it should be. You know, we feel a frustration, a tension in our lives. Or we can choose to surrender our lives to the King who gave his life to make a way for us to know him. You see, the issue was what separated us from God, what caused all these issues, was our own hearts being distant from God, was us choosing to do the wrong things. And that's not a new problem, it's a problem that's existed forever. But we also talk about God being a God of justice. He hates things that are wrong. And so when we do things wrong, he hates that too. And so actually that made a distance between us and God. But Jesus came to pay the punishment for the things that we've done wrong, to make a way for us to know God. It doesn't mean we get everything right. It doesn't mean we've got it all sorted. But what it does mean is that we're invited to be part of this kingdom. It does mean is that you can have peace, freedom, joy. You can have a counselor, and you can experience God's justice. That is the story that we're invited into. And I would encourage you, if you might not have heard this before, you might be new to this, but I encourage you to take this seriously this Christmas. Ask that question, what does life look like? Why is life not as it should be? And is there something that can be done about that? Because I believe that Jesus can come in and he can transform your life. And he wants to do that. He wants to meet with you. And so in a little bit, I'll even give you an opportunity to reflect on this, to even maybe make that decision if you're ready for that today. So just to give you fair warning, so you can have a little reflect on that. But actually, what we do know as well is many of us here have already made that decision, haven't we? We've already made that decision to join his kingdom. But yet, our lives aren't all completely sorted, are they? We still see things that aren't as they should be around us. Even though we experience God's peace, and we may experience his peace way more than we did before we know him, we still also experience anxiety. We still experience things that aren't as they should be. Even though we experience joy, and we know the joy of knowing that Jesus loves us and is with us, we still also don't feel joyful all the time, do we? You see, life isn't always as it should be, even though we're part of God's kingdom. And why is that? Well, I think there's two reasons that that's the case. Two reasons, and these are a couple of reasons that we could spend hours and hours talking about. I'm not going to, don't worry. But one of them is a reason that gives us hope for the future. And the second one is a reason that gives us a call to action now. So we have a hope for the future and we have a call to action now. You see, the first reason that even though we've been part of God's kingdom, that life isn't all that it should be now, is because Jesus hasn't come back yet. See, the story of the Bible is that Jesus came to establish his kingdom, to defeat the power of death, to establish his kingdom on earth, to call us into his family. But actually, it's his kingdom now, but not quite fully yet. Because when Jesus comes back again, he will completely establish his kingdom. We don't know when that's going to happen, but it's going to be amazing when it does. He's going to establish his kingdom. There'll be no more sickness, no more disease. All those who know him will be raised back to life in new bodies on a new earth that was as it's meant to be. You see, when Jesus comes back again, life will be as it was meant to be. We will be with God. There will be no more suffering, no more pain. It says in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 9 to 10, "For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect is come, then that which is in part shall be done away." You see, right now, we're in that part stage. We're in that kingdom now and not yet. We see God's kingdom in part. It's not the fullness of it. God's kingdom is here, but it hasn't fully come yet. There are still things that we see. We see people healed now, but we don't see everybody healed. But we will do when Jesus comes again. We see peace, we see joy, we see freedom in part. But when Jesus comes again, we will see that in fullness. See, the story of Jesus coming is that we have a hope for the future. And that's why we can have joy now. Because we know that one day, all the suffering, all the pain will be restored. We won't be in pain anymore. We won't suffer. We won't see those things. The promise of this, the promise of God's kingdom, the promise of heaven on earth is that one day we will truly have heaven on earth. This will all be restored. The promise of heaven on earth is that one day we will see that in its fullness. But right now, we still have the opportunity for heaven on earth in part. See, because that's the first reason we don't see the fullness, life as it should be, is because Jesus hasn't come back yet. But the second reason is that Jesus asks his church, the people who follow him, to be his ambassadors. You see, that we are called to be vehicles, to be ambassadors of heaven on earth. Actually, just as when Jesus went around, he saw people healed, he brought freedom, he spoke life, he brought little pockets of heaven on earth as he went around. And that's the call to you and to me, that as we go around, we are Christ's ambassadors. We represent Jesus. So as we go, we should see pockets of heaven on earth as we go around. And so I wonder whether the challenge is that sometimes we don't see heaven on earth because we're not being the ambassadors we were called to be. Maybe those around us would see a glimpse of heaven on earth when we step up to be the ambassadors that he has called us to be. You know, I saw this really amazing quote as I was reading an article in preparation, which says this: "The real miracle is the miracle of new life at work in us. Until the reality of God's new creation," that's when Jesus comes back again, "overwhelms this old one, the way that heaven touches this world is now through his people, by his Spirit, through his people like you and me." You see, God at work in this world. The true miracle isn't when we see the spectacular things happen. It's when we, his people, have our lives transformed by Jesus, and then we see the lives of those around us transformed as well. You know, I believe God could change this world by himself. He could. He's God. He made it. He's powerful. But he chooses to let you and me be a part of what he's doing. Those things that we mentioned, again, the markers of his kingdom: peace, freedom, joy, a counselor, and justice. We have the opportunity to bring those things to those around us. As we go to our workplaces, how do we demonstrate peace, freedom, joy? How will we be a counselor to others? I want to clarify as well, we're not a counselor in terms of a trained counselor, unless you are. But actually we bring wisdom, we bring advice to people. We bring hope to those around us. How do we see justice? How do we stand up for justice? You know, too often we can be quiet on those things, but actually we're called to stand up for those things, for justice. You see, we are called to be God's ambassadors, to be his bringers of heaven on earth. And one of the reasons I think that God's kingdom, we don't see more of God's kingdom on earth, sometimes I think it can be down to our inactivity and our unwillingness to join in with what he's doing. Because actually, we all recognize this life isn't as it should be. And for so many of us, that's really painful. And I'm not diminishing that because it's really real. And for so many of us, we're striving to make life more as it should be. We think if I can get a bigger house, if I can work, my family can be happier, then life will be more as it should be for me. I have this picture of life, and this is what it should be like. But how often do we know when we look around us, we see people who reach the very heights of their career, of their profession, of their celebrity, and when they get there, they feel a real emptiness. Because when they get there, it wasn't as it should be. It wasn't what they thought it would be. When I was younger, I used to love reading sport and autobiographies. And the amount of sports stars that get to number one in the world and they go, well, now what? How the amount of sports stars, a week after they've won a World Cup go, that was great, but what do I do now? Because actually what we imagine, those things that we hope for, when we get there, we often see that life isn't as it should be. But I think that's because we are called for something more. We were made for heaven. We were made for heaven on earth, so that when we see less than that, we're dissatisfied. So actually, we are called for heaven on earth, and we're called to be the ambassadors of that. But you see, when we partner with God in what he's doing in his mission, there's a couple of things about it. See, it's costly. It costs us something. Often physically, financially, it might cost us something. But it sometimes costs us the risk of being embarrassed. The risk of rejection, that's probably one of the biggest ones, isn't it? We're worried to step out because we're worried we might be rejected. It costs us something. And it's inconvenient. Actually, life would be so much easier if I just did what I wanted to do. But we're called to something more than that. What I will say is this: it has more impact than you know. When we step out, it has more impact than you know. Not because of what we do, but because when we do this, it's a partnership. We're working with God. So when we step out, God can do immeasurably more than we can ask or imagine. And so I want to challenge you with this a little bit this morning. And as we head into Christmas, I think Christmas is one of the times of year where people are most open, where people are most willing to listen, most willing to receive. Christmas is a golden opportunity. And, we were actually chatting in our Connect group this week about how we speak to those in our workplaces, and I was thinking for me, I work at church, so my work colleagues already know Jesus, hopefully. But for me, how I speak to my friends at cricket or different spaces that I go, and I was challenged because quite often, we don't want to go overboard and completely burn our bridges with people. But I was quite personally challenged because actually, so often, for fear of doing that, I've not done much. If I'm being honest, I'll put my hands up and say that. For fear of, I've not invited friends to something because I've thought, well, I'm playing the long game here. Maybe in about 10 years' time, they might ask me a question. And then a few years after that, they might ask me another question. And that has real value because they see the consistency and they see you there. But actually, sometimes, can I be honest, that the reason I haven't invited to something isn't because I think it will put them off. It's because I'm just a bit worried they might reject me. That's the reality that I face. And sometimes it might not be the right time to invite someone. But I think we have to be honest with ourselves and go, is that because I am playing the long game here? Because sometimes we need to do that. We need to be led by the Spirit to know when it's right. But sometimes it's just because we don't want to be rejected. And so actually, as a challenge that I invited one of my friends to cricket to some of the Christmas programs. So he may or may not come, but actually that's not my responsibility. All I can do is invite. And so my challenge this Christmas for you really is that we are called to be his ambassadors to bring heaven to earth. And so often we don't see that happen just because we fail to act. And so my big challenge, right, this is going to be really theologically deep and really detailed. Are you ready? My challenge this Christmas is to do something. It's really deep. My challenge is to do something. But the reason why I'm keeping this so simple is sometimes I think we want the perfect strategy. We want the perfect thing to do. And if we haven't got the perfect strategy, we don't act. And actually often as well, I think the reason we don't act isn't because we don't want to, isn't always because we're too afraid. Sometimes it's just because we don't know what to do. Has anyone ever felt that before? You're like, actually, I want to do something, but I just don't really know what to do. I'm quite ordinary. I'm not that impressive. I don't know what to do. My challenge for you this Christmas is to do something to bring God's kingdom on earth. Actually, you saw that video. There is lots of different ways you can get involved. For example, you might want to get involved in what's happening at the Salvation Army. That's bringing heaven on earth to those families that experience the joy of Jesus as they receive those presents they wouldn't have already had. Maybe you want to support that some of the schools getting those booklets as they come here to watch the show. Maybe you want to invite some friends to some of the Christmas program and give them hope. Maybe you want to do a bag of hope for somebody, and it might feel a little bit awkward. I'll say it now because then you can ask if I've done it. I'm feeling challenged right now to give one of them to one of my neighbours. So you can ask me now. I've said it now. But I'm feeling challenged by that. And if I'm honest, it feels a little bit awkward and a bit weird. But I think sometimes we've just got to do something. Whether it's a bit clunky, it's a bit awkward. I truly believe as we step out and do things, maybe nothing will happen. Maybe they might find you a little bit awkward. That's okay. They'll get over it. But maybe something amazing could happen. Maybe in doing that, you could open up conversations. You could open up the opportunity for them to come here and see their life transformed by Jesus. So my challenge for you this Christmas is a simple message. I'm a northerner. It's simple. Do something this Christmas. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to invite the worship team to come up. And I'm going to give 2 opportunities to respond. Firstly, I'm going to invite those. If you haven't yet made the decision to follow Jesus, you haven't yet made the decision to make him king over your life, I want to give you the opportunity to do that now. And then secondly, I'm going to give each of us 30 seconds just to pause in the quiet and just to think about what is that something that you could do. Might be awkward, it might be a bit clunky, it might seem small, but I think we all need to step out and do something. Doesn't have to be big, doesn't have to be complicated. But let's not be people who are sort of held to inaction because we overthink things or we're too scared what the outcome will be. Let's just do something this Christmas. So firstly, I want to give you the opportunity, if you're here and you've never decided to follow Jesus, you've never made him king over your life, but you've been stirred by something here, then I want to give you 2 opportunities. One, I want to give you an opportunity just to say, actually, I'm going to open myself up to this. I've been close to this before, but I want to pray a prayer to say, God, if you're real, would you show yourself to me? I'm going to pray that. And then the second prayer is maybe you're a little bit further along this journey, you've been thinking about it, and you want to make a decision to say, Jesus, I want to put my trust in you today, and I want to make you the king of my life. Okay. So why don't you join me in prayer? Might help to close your eyes, might help you concentrate. But I want to pray that first prayer. And if you want to maybe make a decision today to open yourself up to the reality that God might be here, that Jesus might want to work in your life, then maybe pray this with me. So God, I might not have prayed before, I might not know these things, but God, I've heard something today that's spoken to me, that's maybe challenged me, and I want to say right now, God, if you're there, if you're real, would you reveal yourself to me? Would you speak to me? I'm going to try and explore this a bit more, but would you help me in that? Amen. Simple prayer. Then for the next set of people, if you want to make a decision to actually make Jesus the king of your life, would you pray this with me? So Jesus, I thank you that you are a good God who came to this world. Thank you that you made a way for me to know you. I know I've done things wrong. I know I've made mistakes, but thank you that you died to pay the price for those mistakes. And so Jesus, right now I say, would you come into my life? Would you be the king of my life? I want to live by your ways. I want to live as part of your kingdom. And I want to just accept the gift that you gave to me on the cross. And so Jesus, would you help me as I give my life to you, as I start this new life? In Jesus' name, amen. And while our eyes are closed, if you prayed that for the first time, would you just pop your hand in the air? Just because we can chat to you and help you understand this a little bit more. Cool. If that was you and you don't want to stick your hand in the air, come and chat to somebody who's got an I'm on team top on. Would love to help you. So go and chat to one of them. And then finally for us, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give us 30 seconds right now. I want you to think of that something that you can do. Okay? Because this Christmas, I want you to do something. So maybe think of that person. What could it be? What is that something you could do? So you've got 30 seconds starting now. And I want to encourage you, actually write it down or tell somebody, because then you have to do it and you can't chicken out. Okay? So 30 seconds, what's that something that you're going to do?